Thank you for tuning into this episode of Coach Etch Tips. I'm really excited. This is kind of a throwback, a blast from the past interview for me. Coach Matt Dillon is our guest here today. Matt and I first met back in our college days in the late 70s, early 80s. And I was on the basketball team and he was the quarterback of our football team, record-setting quarterback in Division III football. And we kind of went on separate paths, really hadn't crossed paths for many, many years in the coaching and teaching field until Facebook came around. And we had a chance to kind of reconnect back on Facebook. But Coach Dillon has been all around the country. He's coached in Florida, he's coached in Iowa, he's coached in Montana, got a tremendous wealth of experience as a teacher and a coach. He's held administrative positions. He's coached many different subjects. He's had tremendous success, won state championships. He's worked in extremely large, public, diverse school districts. He's also worked in small, private school districts. So his experiences are tremendous. And he really talks about building a culture here today with the students and the athletes he works with. And he's one of those guys that's kind of nearing the end of his career and can really reflect back and have an opportunity to see the difference he's made from some of the students in the past or athletes that he's worked with, because they're growing now and they come back and tell him the stories that they have of the difference he made in their life. And sometimes when you're young, starting out in your career, that's kind of a hard thing to really feel because you're just trying living through the day to survive every single day. So especially if you've worked in athletics, coached in athletics, I think you extremely enjoy hearing Coach Dillon talk today. And I enjoy you coming on. And if you like today's episode, be sure and give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel if you already haven't, and be sure and share it with your friends. I'm sure there's somebody out there you know that may benefit from this episode. So with that said, enjoy the show and the talk with Coach Dillon today. For all of you tuning in, checking us out here today, I'd like to introduce you to an old college teammate or a friend of mine who actually didn't play on the same team. We played different sports, but we hung around to school and kind of pursue the same career path of teaching and coaching, and take some time here to talk today at Coach Etch Tips about creating relationships and kind of dealing with the stresses and pressures that we deal with in our professional world. And I know, Matt, you've been around at all different levels, different parts of the country, and coached and taught with kids in all ages, a lot of different subject areas. So why don't you give us a little bit and tell us about yourself, kind of what brought you into teaching and kind of how you pursued through it and why you're here today.
Well, I think, we probably had similar experiences at Cornell with the faculty there in terms of kind of steering us, I think, towards teaching and coaching. I had a great relationship with Coach Clark, the head football coach, and Rob Ash, and then after him, Steve Miller, Coach Maskey, who was your basketball coach, but also an assistant football coach, tremendous human being. And unfortunately, Coach Maskey and Coach Clark are no longer with us, but they were great guys and never would have an opportunity to pass up a conversation with either of those two gentlemen. And they were great influences on my life. And it's a big reason why I got into teaching and coaching.
Is that when you came to Cornell, were you planning to major in something else? Were they people that kind of moved you in this direction, or were you thinking about being a teacher to begin with when you came there?
Well, I really thought that I was potentially, my first major at Cornell was geology, and I thought I was going to be a rock hound and go chase trying to find some oil wells somewhere, But I quickly, after about 2 years, I went through one block of my junior year and said, I don't think this is going to be for me. I need to follow my passion, which I think is going to be teaching and coaching. And so I switched majors to economics and business, and I was able to get into a situation where I got enough certification and enough classes and enough different courses. I got my certification in econ, and I also had a certification in earth science, which I'm using for the first time in 38 years, by the way, this year. And a variety of other things. I went on and got my master's degree at Iowa State in athletic administration and got certified in physical education as well. So those are the areas that I'm certified in. Obviously, coaching was the big driver behind that, the big passion that I had. I've had 1 year of experience as an assistant coach. That was my first year as a teacher at my old high school down in Fort Lauderdale. And then we moved up to Iowa. I got married that summer to Marva, who thankfully I'm still married to.
All right.
She's been through all of these moves with us, and it's been a great ride. But we moved up here to Iowa. Took over a program at North Polk High School, just north of Des Moines, about 10 or 15 miles, and neat little situation. You know, you're kind of in for it in the interview when the principal tells you, I don't expect you to win a game for 3 years because the program's in such bad shape.
Yeah.
You know, and when you're 23 and you're interviewing for your first head coaching job, you kind of think you're invincible. You got that Vince Lombardi mentality, you know, and I said, who's this guy talking about? You know, we're going to come out, we're going to win championships, you know. Well, we ended up finally by year 5, but he was pretty close in those first 3 years. I think we won 2 games in that first 3-year period. And then we turn around and go 7-2 the next year in year 4, and year 5, we make it all the way to the state quarterfinals and lost a really tough game in overtime. But you know, we had a shot really to be in the Final Four for a team that had never been to the playoffs before. So that was a great thing for me and part of my career. And at that point, you know, I started looking at some other possibilities, and I ended up running across Bozeman, Montana. Had advertised, you know, the way they used to advertise for teaching jobs and coaching jobs was in the Des Moines Register. Yeah. And I saw this article or the advertisement in the Des Moines Register for a head football coach in Bozeman, Montana. Well, Montana was one of the areas that I thought very interesting in high school that I might want to go to college for, because at that time I was still, other than geology, forestry was a big area of interest for me. So, and they had a great forestry program out there. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to check this out and see. And, you know, I sent in my, my application and resume early December, didn't hear anything for like 3 months. And I thought, well, you know, I had actually totally forgotten about it. And you know how that goes. So I'm in class, I think it was late February, and my principal comes walking down. He says, hey, I just wanted you to know, he said, I got a call from the athletic director at Bozeman High School in Bozeman, Montana, and I think they're going to want to interview you. And I said, wow. I said, Chuck, I applied for that back in December. I said, okay, you know. So then I sat around for another 2 or 3 weeks before I finally got the phone call. Oh. And so I flew out there on a Tuesday night, flew out of Minneapolis and got into Bozeman about 7 or 8 o'clock at night, really dark out. You can't really, other than the street lights and all that kind of stuff, couldn't see what was going on. Get up the next morning, my interview's not until 10 o'clock. So I got up early. I want to drive around town and check it out. It was one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen. It was absolutely amazing. And I said, wow. And it looks like the mountains are just like right there. They're like 10, 15 miles away, but I mean, you feel like you're right in the middle of it. And I thought, man, this is one of the coolest places I've ever been. So I went into the interview, had a great interview. They offered me the job. I said, I need some time to talk to my wife about it. You know, she had never really, other than going to Cornell, had never really moved away from her parents. We had our first 2 children already, both young, both under 5. So, you know, that was that was an issue for us. We worked through it. Finally, after about a week's discussion, she said, okay, I'm ready. We can do this. So we did and moved out there. And man, the first year was tough. And the AD told me, he said, the cupboard is bare. Now, believe it or not, this high school, the year before I got there, they had 2 seniors that ended up starting in the NFL. Mm-hmm. And one of them also led the nation in shot put distance his senior year. He threw the shot over 67 feet. I mean, so that tells you what kind of a physical specimen this guy was. And then they had another guy. He ended up starting for the Redskins in the D-line. The other guy started at middle linebacker for the Giants for about 6 or 7 years. And I'm thinking to myself, man, I mean, they got players like that. We're going to be okay. Well, we didn't have anybody like that for the for the next couple of years for sure. And so we struggled in that first year. We really had to change the culture there because the culture was not good. Established, and one of my strengths, I feel like, Jeff, is as a coach, is the ability to establish relationships with kids and coaches and building on that relationship as you move forward. And much more so than X's and O's. I think that, to me, that's the most important thing in coaching. In the old days, I used to think, man, if we could just run this offense or do this or run this play. What I've learned over time is it's about establishing trust with your athletes. Right. And it's a two-way street. You want to have the trust in your players, and you want those players to trust you, and you want to have trust and build trust in your coaching staff. And when you have that, you have a chance to do something special.
And that's I like, because both, I know you've had great success as a coach. You go into places where people don't expect much, you don't have much. And what I've always known to see, the people that are successful coaches are great teachers in the classroom too, to get those kids to believe in themselves, for you to believe in them more than they believe in themselves. And you talk about trust, and you talk about kind of that culture and relationship building. What are some of the things, whether it was with your athletes or with your students in the classroom, that you did intentionally to create those relationships? Because we talked earlier, it's not something that somebody trained you to do. You just had
no, that's right. And you realize as you move forward in your career, you realize that what becomes the most important are the relationships that you build with those players. And what I'm more concerned about is not so much how many wins and losses I have and how many championships we've won and all that kind of stuff. What I'm going to remember most are the relationships that I've built with these players over these 38 or 39 years that I've been in coaching. And now these young men that I've coached are now doctors, lawyers, commercial real estate guys, people that have made a tremendous success out of their life. They're great fathers. They're great husbands. That's what matters to me. And I think it's really important as I go through, Facebook's been a wonderful thing for me because I've reconnected with so many of my old players and it's hard for me to believe, but I've got players that are approaching 55 years old, former players. And I'm thinking to myself, that can't be possible, but it is, because I started at such a young age as a head coach. I got, 23 years old. I got my first head coaching job. So
how did you're 23 years old and you're walking into that first classroom or that first football practice, and you're basically about 5-6 years older than those players. And, from a social standpoint, you can probably connect them pretty quick, but as a professional, as a teacher, to build that relationship that 30 years later, now you're connected. It's cool. You can find that out. But as a young coach, you don't know that. What were some things you did to reach out to them? How did you introduce yourself? How did you first deal with them personally?
Well, the most important thing was, again, trying to establish that trust and what they saw. See, North Polk was an old school building. The main building was built in like 1906, and we didn't have a weight room, and we really had nothing in terms of facilities. We had the old cinder track, wooden bleachers at our football stadium. Barely had any seating on the visitor side. It wasn't a place that you saw, great things happening from a facility standpoint. So what we went to our principal with and with our players, we talked about building a weight program. Well, to build a weight program, you kind of need a weight room, right? So we had a big open basement down in the schoolhouse, and the principal, who's still I think the best principal I've ever worked for, his name is Chuck Knight, still a great friend of mine and just an awesome guy to work for. And he said, well, let's do this. He said, let's put 2 walls in here. We'll use the back wall and we'll use a side wall as our base, and then we'll build 2 walls to close this room out. And the room itself was it ended up being about 600 square feet, about 20 feet by 30 feet. We got a couple benches in there, got a couple squat racks, some areas to do some power cleans and do some deadlifts and some dumbbells and all that. And we raised a ton of that money. The kids did, because they were so excited about just the possibility of having a weight room in there. We raised like 10 grand on a lift-a-thon between about 30 players, and we just got after it. And we spent a weekend and built the 2 walls for the room. And the principal was right in there with me swinging a hammer. I mean, he like I said, he was awesome. And, you know, and that's the thing you're looking for, the trust, and the players could see it. They could see that we had trust in it. It was important enough to me that we got that weight room built. We started our weight program as soon as we got that weight room built. And the kids, all of a sudden, they're seeing positive things happen that hadn't happened in that school since they'd been there. And I think that made all the difference in the world. You know, we started out, Jeff, the first year in 1982, I had 28 players out for football, 6 seniors, 4 juniors, 3 sophomores, and 15 freshmen. But we had 38th graders and 35 7th graders. So we knew it was going to come. It was just going to be a matter of time. So, you know, we got through the thin years with those really small numbers, 6, 4, and 3. But when we got to year 4, we still had 15 of those guys out for football. Those 15 freshmen were now 15 juniors. They'd been in the weight room for 3 years. All of a sudden, we became a pretty good football team.
So and then going through those hard times, you know, trying to build up, what were some of the things you said to keep them believing in themselves, to keep them going, you know, just directly to them? And then how well did you get to know those kids off the field too? Because I know you talked about.
Well, really, really well, you know, because you live in the community, or I lived in the community, and I think that's important. I think you need to live in the community you're working in. So you know, you'd see those guys. Like, I also helped coach basketball for 3 years. I was assistant basketball coach. I was also the head baseball coach. And I was involved in those kids' lives and more than just football. You know, it was other things. I was teaching 7th and 8th grade social studies, but I had all these kids in these different sports and stuff. So, you know, most of those kids were multiple sport athletes, which I truly believe in. I think I think the biggest crime that happens in schools is when kids are kind of forced by a coach to say, I need you to focus on this sport. I don't think that's the coach's role. I totally disagree with that in terms of education. I think those kids need to experience more than just one sport. That's totally my opinion, but I think when I look at college coaches and I see what it is they're looking to recruit, most of the time, most of these coaches, Matt Campbell at Iowa State, Kirk Ferentz at Iowa, they want kids that are multiple sport athletes because they're forced to compete year round. And if they don't have that opportunity to compete year round, I think there's a lot of that lost in the translation in terms of athleticism.
Now, yeah, you've been around probably a lot of times. You can walk and do what you do in your sleep because you've done it for so many years. But if you're talking to young teachers coming in and they're going into the classroom or they're going on the field to coach it, they're trying to figure out how can I reach these kids? What's some of the 2 or 3 main tips you could give somebody to learn to connect with those students to start to make a difference for them?
I think the first thing is this is again a 39-year veteran doing this. And I probably didn't do this when I was younger, but I've learned over the years is to make that connection. The first thing you got to do is learn their names, right? Yeah. You want to be able to call them by name. Now, if you're sitting in a room and it's October or November and you still don't know what these kids' names are, you're going to struggle building those relationships because that kid's going to turn you off. You know, so the first thing I'm going to attempt to do is learn their names so I can call them by name. The second thing I'm going to do is find out what they're involved in. Yeah. And you know, if I got a wrestler in my class or if I got a kid that's in the choir or whatever, I'm going to ask them about different things that are going on outside of the classroom so I can so I can let them know that I care about them as a person, not just as the athlete that plays for me, but I care about their life. You know, we got a kid, and I've got him in 2 or 3 classes now. I talked him into being our manager for football. I mean, when you look at this kid and you say, how can that kid be the manager? He's like 6'2", 215 pounds. And I mean, he's a beast. He's a rodeo rider. He rides bronc bulls, or not bulls, but bronc horses in the rodeo in the area here. But he had never played football ever. He says, Coach, he says, I just don't think I want to play, but is there something else I can do? I said, yeah. I said, you can film our games for us on Friday night. He said, oh, I'd like to do that. I think that'd be fun. So, you know, we got a kid like that involved in our football program who really probably had gone to a few games over the course of his high school life, but really probably didn't go to very many. Now all of a sudden he's involved with the team. You know what I'm saying? So I'm always looking for avenues to get people involved in different things. And I think it's really important that the kids see that you're interested in them as a person, not just as an athlete or as a player. You're interested in this kid because he's your quarterback. Well, I am, but I'm also interested in how he plays on the basketball team. And he's also my #1 golfer on the golf team. And, you know, those are things that I care about. And I want him to know that wherever he wants to go to school, I'm going to try to help him. If he wants to play football, if he wants to play golf, we're going to try to help him get on some program where he can go help that school. So, and I think that's really important.
How about you talk about caring? You think of an example, because sometimes I know I haven't been a coach myself, and sometimes, you know, as a parent, you got to do it. But a time when you had a kid that you really cared so much about, and they goofed up, they made a mistake like a teenager's going to make, and they didn't follow the rules, they didn't do what they should do to fit into the culture, where you had to say, look, I need to discipline you to teach you a lesson. Even though it was hard to do, that person was upset and sad that you did it, and it ended up making them a better person in the long run, because they don't always get it at the time, but later in years, sometimes they come back and you say, hey, Coach, you know what you did for me, I'm glad you did it now.
You know, I've had several of those instances, and you're going to over 39 years, right? I mean, it's just a natural thing. And the thing is you as a coach, you've got to have a red line that say you can't cross. You cross this line, we're going to have some discipline issues that we've got to take care of, and one of those is going to be playing time. I noticed it more in South Florida probably than I've noticed it up here in Iowa. Mm-hmm. I had a quarterback down there that, I mean, this kid was a really, really good football player, but for whatever reason, he had a hard time staying out of trouble in school. And you know, we sit down not every day, but probably about at least once a week. And he was a young kid. He started for me as a freshman and as a sophomore. And the sophomore year is when he started having all the problems. And I said, you know, you got to help me out, because you're going to force me to have to do something that I don't want to do, because I'm going to have to sit you down if you can't do the things that I need you to do. And I'm not asking you to do a lot. I'm asking you to not be a jerk in class. You know, don't be a jerk to those teachers that are just there trying to help you, you know. And man, I tell you, that he was a tough case, but I think by the end of his sophomore year, he finally kind of figured it out and finished his career pretty well. And you know, and you just, when I see kids that are struggling and have problems, it's usually because they're trying to fit in somewhere. You know what I'm saying? They're trying to find a place, trying to find their place. Who do I fit in with? Is it this group of people? Is it this group of people? I think the bigger the school, believe it or not, the tougher that is, I think, because now you got so many different people or things pulling you in different directions. Whereas in the smaller schools, it's a much more tight-knit community, I think. And you know, when you only got 40 kids in a class, in terms of 40 seniors, roughly 40 juniors, you know, you got 160 total kids in the school. Everybody knows everybody. Nobody's getting away with anything. But when you got 2,500 kids in your school, you know, all of a sudden that, you may fall through the cracks, you may get lost, and that's a tough thing. So you really got to stay on top of those kids and love them up and let them know, hey, listen, this isn't personal. I'm doing this to try to help you become a better person. And I've always said, you're going to become a better athlete if you play for me. To me, that's a given. But what I hope and what my goal is that you're going to be a better person when you leave my program than you were when you came into it. Yeah. And I think that, to me, that's been my hallmark of my coaching and teaching career. I truly believe in kids. It's going to take an awfully lot of things for a kid to do for me to lose faith in them. You know what I'm saying? So, and I'm always going to err on the side of trying to help this kid out, become a better person, and do what I have to do to make that happen. And I think that's really important.
I think it's important. Sometimes a young teacher, a coach, needs to borrow stories from the older people. I know I grew up in a coach's household, and being around Coach Maskey and Coach Clark, there's lots of stories being told, and you can just kind of learn from their stories, because experience is something you have to live to experience it, but you can learn from other people to expand your experience quicker. And I know unfortunately, at a young age, about the same time we were both starting in the early 80s, my father passed away at 50, who was a mentor of mine I coached with. Him and Coach Maskey were 6 months apart. And having attended both of their funerals, it really hit me early as a young teacher and coach to see the people that came from all over the country, because they both had many years and both coached in high school and college, that people that they'd worked with 20, 30 years before would do everything in their power to get there. And it let me find out real young at the age of 26 that, wow, this is a big responsibility. And you don't get to see at 26 the impact you're making. But now we're kind of in those years where you've had a chance to have those kids come back and say, thanks, coach. And I see some things on Facebook, and you put stuff up in the comments from your old players and stuff. You can just tell how they care about you and the difference you made for them. And I think that's kind of technology nowadays. That's cool to find out, because you're not there to physically watch at your funeral to see everybody saying, gee, thanks for what you did.
That's right. It's nice to know while you're still alive, right? And I'm sure Coach Maskey and Coach, your dad, Coach Etchen, would have said the same thing. But the sad part is sometimes this profession chases people into their grave at an early age, whether it's from the pressure, whether it's from the parents, whether it's whatever it might be. And that's the tough part of it is, I think the pressure is there more today than it ever has been, because of social media, because of the trying to get kids into college and doing different things. I just think there's a tremendous amount of pressure on coaches to perform, to win games. And I think you're seeing a lot of coaches leave the profession because of it, which is sad.
A good segue, because the last thing I want to talk about is kind of like mindfulness and how you deal with pressure. That's kind of doing. I talk to teachers in schools, and you hit the nail on the head. Not only are we getting young people not coming to the profession, people are getting chased out, whether it's through coaching or teaching, and just say, I can't deal with it anymore. And I get concerned, because our grandkids, what are they going to have out there to teach them? And it's really important that school districts and administration and coaches and athletic directors can work with the young people to help them deal with those stresses and pressures. And what are some things you can share here, just kind of nearing the end here, about how can help people and how you've dealt with it over the years? I'm sure you've had a lot of ups, but I'm sure you've had some of those downs.
Absolutely. And really, Jeff, this year, 2020, is probably the worst year in terms of pressure that I've ever been involved in. It has nothing to do with athletics or sports. It has everything to do with the pandemic, you're like glued to your TV set. What's the governor saying today? Because we don't know what's going to happen. You know what I'm saying? So it's tough. It's a struggle. It's a struggle every day that I'm going through with this, trying to deal with the pandemic and making sure that our kids are safe, that you're safe. I'm in that advanced age category now, So I'm worried about that. You know what I mean? So, the struggle is real for sure. And hopefully this vaccine will come through and will be as effective as what they say it is in the testing, and that'll alleviate those pressures. But, really the thing, you're not going to find any more pressure as a coach than what you put on yourself. And the number one thing that I truly believe in as a coach and as a teacher, I'm gonna show up and I'm gonna do the best job that I possibly can do for that 24-hour period, and then I'm gonna put that to bed, and I'm gonna not worry about it at night. When I go home at night, Marva and I don't have a lot of conversations about how was practice, what's the team look like, any of that kind of stuff. We just don't do it. I leave that stuff at the office.
Okay.
So I can come home and hopefully have a little bit of normalcy for the 3 to 4 hours that we're awake before we go to bed. And
you always with you this long because you did do that.
I think so. If you come home and you're yelling and you're ranting and raving because you had a bad practice, or you had played a bad game, or whatever it might be, those things, now you're putting pressure on your marriage. So I made it, to me, it was very important when I came home, and we had our kids young. I'll give you an example. My oldest son is 37.
Okay.
Sammy, my daughter, is 34. My youngest one is 33. So I think we had all three kids before I was 30. I think Marva was 27 or 28 by the time we had them all. Yeah. So I wanted to be a dad too. You know what I'm saying? So exactly. I would come home, and when I got home, football was over with at that point, or teaching was over with at that point. I was playing with my kids or talking to Marva or doing whatever. And I didn't want to be that coach that ended up divorced, or because he couldn't pay attention to his own kids, or had to be in the office until 10 or 11 at night to watch film, which I think is ludicrous. But I mean, that's my feeling on the deal, so I truly believe that hopefully I was that person for my kids. I'd like to think that my kids feel that way, that I was there for them. But the other thing that I did, Jeff, especially in the preseason before school started, is my kids went to the football practice with me. Yeah. So if we were doing 2-a-days or 3-a-days, I'd load the kids up in a car and away we go. And next thing you know, we'd be in the middle of practice, and my daughter would have shimmied up the goalpost, and she's standing on top of the goalpost. I'm like, "What are you doing up there?" "I'm just climbing, Dad." I said, "Okay, well, don't fall, because that'll be a bad thing, right?" So, but those are the types of things that I have memories about. And it's funny when we get together, and our daughter lives about an hour and a half away down in Des Moines, and she'll talk about the early days, about like when I was trying to teach her how to play soccer, and you realize I was never a soccer player, right? So I would kick the ball towards her, and I'd hit her in the stomach with it, knock the wind out of her, because she was all of about 40 pounds back then, And she says, "Dad, you kicked that ball so hard at me." I said, "Well, Sammy, I was just trying to make you better, So we kibitz about all that kind of stuff, but it's been really cool. Trying to be a dad and be a coach and a teacher is kind of a tough deal, but you just work your way through it. And I was fortunate. I was able to coach my two boys in baseball coming up through the ranks, and enjoyed that part of it. And finally gave that up when my youngest one got to the freshman team at Dowling Catholic. So, and that was sad, because we had a lot of fun on some of those trips, on the national tournaments and different stuff. So, I missed that part of it. But anyway.
I don't want to keep you here all day, but I just wanted to wrap up, kind of here. I know you said the other day, not sure how many more years you got left in doing this, and you can go be full-time dad, husband and stuff, and whatever, golfer, all that stuff. But, at the end, the 39 years now, the life is significance. I mean, just if you get to wrap up a message that any young people or tough teachers and coaches in a tough time right now, to tell them to hang in there, about how it makes you feel down the road. If you just share that with them in closing, I'd sure appreciate it.
Here's what I believe, Jeff. I think, and I tell this to my football players all the time. I said, you've got to have a passion for something in life. My passion right now is coaching football, coaching young men in the game of football. That's been my passion for 39 years. And I love what I'm doing. And I don't know, I can't tell you what that will be like when I hang up the cleats and say, I'm done. You know what I'm saying? But what I tell them is find something in this life, in this world that you can be passionate about. And then go do it with everything that you've got. And and life will do miraculous things for you if you'll follow that path. And,
Right.
and
Well,
I truly believe it.
I mean, that's when we all get to the end, we want to feel like we led a life of significance and made a difference and feel fulfilled. And I just want to thank you for sharing that, Matt. And for those of you here, I'm going to have a quick wrap up with some key points of what he said today. In case you weren't taking notes, just listening, you can feel free to stay on for that here too. Thanks a lot, Matt, for checking with us today on Coach Etch Tips. I sure appreciate it.
You bet, Natch. Good to see you, buddy. Thank you.
Wow, what a great discussion. I hope you enjoyed listening to Coach Dillon as much as I enjoyed talking with him and kind of talking out some old memories. And I learned a lot from him because when somebody's been doing it for 39 years and had to learn a lot of it from the seat of his own pants, had a lot of great wisdom to share. And just a few key points, I thought some things that really bear with me while I read my notes here. You know, he found his passion in college, but one of the big things he found out early on is the role the trust plays with your students and your athletes, and that building that culture around trust, you wanting to trust them and wanting them to trust you. And if you're coach, trusting your staff and how important that is. I said that relationships is his priority and how he helped them watch them grow because of the impact he wants to have on their life. That's number one. It's not about winning games or anything like that, but it's that relationship and how he can help move into the future. One other thing he talked about is how much he's enjoyed Facebook, getting a chance to reconnect with old players and students on Facebook and kind of talk about the past. Two of his main tips out there for helping to create that relationship, to create that bond, that trust is number one, to learn their names and be able to call them by their name, say their names correctly the way they want to be said, not just, hey, you, hey, student. I think it means a lot to people when you address them by their first name. And when you want to talk to them, that starts to make them feel like, you really have found out who they are. And then number two, he says to find out what they like to do outside the classroom or off the field. What are they interested in? What are their passions? To get involved in their lives outside of that classroom, because that's when a student really starts to know you care about them as the person, not necessarily just as a student. One of the things he's found out early on in his career from a discipline standpoint is that you got to clearly identify that red line, whether it's in the classroom or the sport you're coaching, that here's the line and there's consequences to pay if you go past that. And so the kids know where that line is going to be and those barriers are going to be. And he wound up, sharing with us that his number one belief for him to survive as a teacher and a coach, especially in all the pressures of today, if you're here in the COVID world, is to, when you go up to work, show up and give it everything you have during that day. Prepare, plan, give it everything you got. And then when you're done, when you go home, leave it there. Go home and focus on your own life. Whether you're single, go home, and take care of yourself, some self-care. Do the things that you like to do outside of your job. Go home and focus on your spouse or your children if they're young or growing. You talk about how his kids were young. He's kind of involved them in what he do and had them around during the summer times. But when you go home, it's time for them to have dad there or to have husband there or wife there. So focus on that. And Ian's telling us, he tells kids to go out and figure out their passion. What are they passionate about? And to pursue that in life with all they've got. Because if you really do go out and chase your passion, you're never really working. You're just out there living life. And then life will bring a lot back to you as you go out and pursue your passion. And if your teacher is to serve those students, to serve that community, the parents, the athletes that you may coach. So go out there and use that passion and pursue it with all you got. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode with Coach Dillon. If you did, be sure to subscribe to our channel and click the thumbs up, like, and share with your colleagues and friends, whoever you know out there that might benefit from this. So with that, again, go out and pursue your #dreams, passion, and purpose with all you've got. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.